To answer the question posed in the title of this video, we must first ask ourselves, what even is good art? The issue here lies with the question. It presupposes that if we were to find the secret sauce of good art in a vacuum, we could continually apply it and make great art forever. Good artwork isn't just created, it doesn't just appear out of thin air. Good artwork emerges. The goodness as a quality of the artwork emerges through its continuous value to a culture or a society. Great art already exists. We have plenty of examples. So the question isn't to ask what makes good art. The question is to ask, what does all good art have in common? Great art could just be raw technical skill, right? Well, no, not at all. There's a massive variance in applied skill between great artworks. Look at the Statue of David versus a Mark Rothko painting, for example. I could pick up my little pencil, I could pick up my little ballpoint pen, and draw a photorealistic portrait of Tony Stark Iron Guy. But there is no way that would end up in those damned history books. If it's not skill, is it the complexity of the allegory and the symbolism? Well, it's not that either. Go to any church in any village in Italy, and you will see biblico fresco paintings across every ceiling. Most of them so allegorically and symbolically complex, you could dedicate an entire dissertation just to dissecting one of the paintings. Yet, many of the artists who painted those paintings are completely unknown. Look, it's clearly not a single attribute that makes art great. Rather, it's an intersection of a few different attributes. Great visual art is the intersection of these three aspects. 1. Beauty. Is it literally beautiful? You know, like color, harmony, balance, the golden ratio, the unquantifiable aspect that you only know when you see it. Now, this is where most midwits will repeat some variation of the phrase, art is subjective. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I got a question for you. Who told you to say that? Where does that come from? Can you cite me, the fucking author? That's just some proverb we all repeat. Have you ever thought about the implications of beauty is subjective? There's no hierarchy of beauty, there's no hierarchy of stimuli. If one person thinks one thing is beautiful, they're as right as somebody else. Like, somebody who thinks that tung sahur is the fucking event horizon of human ingenuity and human artistic creation, and they are as right as somebody who has studied the Sistine Chapel. Beauty is subjective, beauty is not subjective. You know beauty when you see it. Number 2, subversion. Much like great comedy being predicated on the subversion of expectations.
I think we should kill Hitler. Me and you go suicide, kill him.
It's like he died 50 years ago, probably.
Did he? I didn't even know he was sick.
Great art, the art that makes an impact, is art that breaks the mold of some sort. It's the reason why the Impressionists of the late 18th century are all basically art household names, with their revolutionary techniques in paint handling. Subversion is the reason we know Rothko, Pollock, Newman, and all of the abstract expressionists of the 1950s in New York. Artists who shook the foundation of art so much, they single-handedly moved the center of the art world from Paris to New York after World War II. Lack of subversion is the reason Hitler didn't get into art school. Many people argue that Hitler wasn't a bad painter. And to that, I would absolutely agree. Hitler was not a bad painter. These are fine paintings, but the context in which they were painted totally changes everything. When Hitler applied to art school in Vienna in 1907 and 1908, the Vienna Succession was at its peak. 1908 was the year Gustav Klimt painted the fucking Kiss. Being Hitler in Vienna in 1908 is like being the best artist in your high school and expecting to get a solo gallery opening in New York the second you leave. Sorry Hitler fans, but Hitler did not deserve to get into art school. Number 3. The narrative. The spiritual patina that emerges as a quality of time passing. Something maybe both beautiful and subversive, but we must remember it to be so. We know the Mona Lisa because it was stolen from a gallery. We know Marcel Duchamp's fountain because it was submitted under a fake name. We know Van Gogh because Van Gogh was not famous at all in his lifetime. Humans are meaning-making creatures. But great art doesn't just appear from thin air. In fact, It's basically useless to ask what makes great art without asking what makes a great artist. And it's with asking this question, we rip open the corpse of this video and start gnawing at its entrails. God of the sun, I'm taking you down on the inside. What's up, crackalicious honkies? I turn down ads every day. I won't take money from Israel companies. Fuck you. Raid Shadow Legends, fuck you. I won't take money from Chinese companies. I won't take money from AI, but I'll take your money. If you go to my Patreon right now and subscribe, you know, I'm Patreon funded. I also do commissions. I painted this, I painted this, I painted this. I can paint portraits. I went to art school. I paid tens of thousands of dollars to go to fine art school to learn how to paint. And you can go to my Patreon.shop and commission me. I will paint any face. I will paint furry faces. I'll paint your dad. I'll paint your mom. I'll paint your little brother. I don't give a fuck. I just love painting. I can't be bought. I can't be compromised. But I will take your money. And I personally love you. According to a 1998 meta-analysis of artists and non-artists, a 2021 analysis of highly creative individuals, and the 2016 study on creative achievement, the number one similarity between artists' brains is openness to experience. So much so that lack of openness has an outright negative effect on creativity. Now, I'm sure this is unsurprising to anybody watching this video, but there's more to unpack here. Coupled with this openness, artists have a high risk tolerance and a high tolerance for ambiguity. And this risk tolerance primarily exists as social risk taking, according to a 2017 study. Now, what you'll find interesting about these factors is they map really neatly onto people who identify as liberals, with liberals being traditionally more open and less risk averse. And this is contrasted with those who self-identify as conservative, with them being typically low openness, low tolerance for ambiguity, and low risk tolerance. And this makes sense, right? They're literally called liberals and conservatives. Change versus preserve, more versus less. Those words still fucking mean something, right? Well, actually, they increasingly mean nothing. The idea that liberals are more open-minded and that conservatives are more closed-minded doesn't really track anymore. According to a 71-year meta-analysis using data from 1948 to 2019, researchers Marcus Kemelmeyer and Jesse Acosta found the gap between personality traits of political ideologies has narrowed massively. Where closed-mindedness was once the primary marker of conservatism, that gap has almost entirely disappeared. And this convergence creates a paradox for our understanding of art and politics. If the personality differences that once explained why liberals dominated creative fields are disappearing, what does this mean for artistic innovation? What happens when the rebellious political orientation becomes the establishment? You'll have an issue here if you follow the assumption that great art is inherently liberal or made by liberals. But great artists aren't politically dogmatic. They're open and risk-taking, and those traits can exist within any context. Historically, most great art has always been in context to a conservative society. Like the Chinese artist Ai Weiwei, who was in prison for months after a piece remembering earthquake victims. Or artists at the end of the Weimar Republic, like Otto Dix and George Grosz, whose art was burned during Hitler's purge of degenerate art. But what if we changed the context of which this art was created? What if liberals and progressives create art in a context that is already predominantly liberal and progressive? Where art that would have once been dangerous critique now becomes status quo dogma that perfectly fits the narrative of the regime. This concept leads us to the liberal bias of institutions. Institutions are now dispositionally conservative. Not politically, dispositionally. The long march of progressive politics within academia, starting in the 1960s, reached its apex in the late 2010s with the peak of the woke movement. My younger audience may not be hip to this, but there was a point in 2018 where communicating at all was like walking on eggshells. There was no room to question anything or even be edgy because it was funny. It literally just wasn't worth it. You were putting your entire social life and career on the line. Holding innocuous and now common sense opinions like being against invasive surgeries for minors or questioning the efficacy of mass immigration was enough to get you socially blacklisted or potentially fired from your job. Now I'd argue the pendulum is swinging back the other way much too hard, much too fast. But hey man, that's life in the fast lane. All I'm saying is that academics undeniably have a liberal bias. This isn't about politics or card holding. This is about the psychological disposition of the people that populate colleges and universities. The issue here is that because academia has been progressive for so long, we still believe it to be progressive in a literal sense, still carrying the vanguard of radical politics. If you're a third-year sociology student in a major Western university, you exist in the institutional equivalence of the Catholic Church in the 1400s. You are engaging with and pushing the doctrine of the dominant cultural influence. To paraphrase the Substack writer Deep Left Analysis, the post-grad millennial is the new Karen, the new WASP, not only beholden to the dominant memes of the last 50 years, but actively pushing the agenda. All of this under the guise of radicalism. Liberals are the new conservatives. So how does this affect the art world? The art world is split between social media and academia. Your success as an academic artist is contingent on your thesis advisors, building relationships with professors, getting university gallery shows, and partaking in university artist residencies. This is much different than social media, where your success is predicated on your skill and viral potential, regardless of your messaging or your politics. Simply put, if you stray too far from the political agenda of academia, you're not going to be successful. And under the myth of perceived radicalism, the academic artist becomes conservative, following rules, playing it safe, creating art that hasn't been transgressive since the 1980s. When I was doing my master's in fine art at the University of Ottawa, I remember so distinctly walking into the Ottawa Art Gallery, and behind the ticket desk is a giant marquee sign that just says they, referencing non-binary pronouns. An art piece so on the nose, it feels like parody, like something that belongs in a South Park episode rather than at a fucking actual city's art gallery. Talk to anybody who's done an art degree in the last decade, and you'll hear crazy stories about the kind of art that is championed. Stuff like "Kill all white people" written on a sign and hung up as legitimate artwork. And I'm not being like a chud here. I'm not offended about the messaging. I'm not offended that the sign says "Kill all white people." I'm offended that it's like so fucking on the nose. It's so cliche, and it's objectively bad art. And leaving cliche politics aside, liberal art is also just super lame. Artists that are baked into institutions are dealing with subject matter that's been overplayed since the 1990s. Notions of form, the purpose of painting, postmodernism versus metamodernism. Listen, Buster. There are trans women railing Adderall and inventing new genres of music every hour. And you're concerned whether portrait painting appeals to motifs of colonial power? There's more artistic innovation happening on TikTok than there is in any university MFA program. It's important to note that this anti-liberal tirade isn't to say that conservatives make better art by the virtue of being conservative. This whole idea of like, oh, conservatism is the new counterculture, conservatism is the new punk rock, doesn't make any fucking sense. Because it's contextual. It's not about being conservative. It's about the kind of person open to conservative ideas in a liberal environment. Conservatives, in a very traditional sense, usually make horrible fucking art. And there's so many examples of art made for a conservative audience. Artists like Thomas Kincaid, who made his living painting kitschy idealistic landscapes of cottages and green meadows. Ooh, look at the happy forest creatures wandering about. Thomas Kincaid was the best-selling American artist in the 1990s, grossing $100 million in annual sales through his retail stores found in almost every mall in America. Kincaid will be remembered for selling calendars, or perhaps is emblematic of a certain cozy American moment, but not as a good artist. Thomas McNaughton, the artist who does all the Trump paintings where he's like fucking sucking George Washington's dick. These paintings are highly detailed, yet extremely derivative. The oil painting equivalent of political cartoons. They appeal to the conservative disposition. They have low ambiguity, high technical skill, and there is no deeper meaning. Hitler! Yeah, I went there. We talked about Hitler's art already, but it bears repeating that these aren't bad paintings. Anyone who tells you Hitler was a bad painter is incorrect. Hitler wasn't a bad painter. He was a bad artist. This is another great example of trad conservative art. All of this in early 1900s Vienna, while Egon Schiele and Klimt were making some of the greatest art of the 20th century. If I were to make the perfect piece of conservative art, the kind of thing your horrible xenophobic grandmother would hang above her Chesterfield or her credenza, I'd paint a little pony. However, if I were to make art to piss off my professors and get socially blacklisted from academia, I'd make stuff like this. Meta-ironic pagan Nazism funk edits. Trans femme hyperpop with fascist undertones. You could scroll Twitter for 15 minutes and see more transgressive and radical aesthetics than you could at 10 years in a university. Like, people forget that first and foremost, Sam Hyde is a graphic designer who studied at RISD. The design direction of MDE and World Peace might be the single most influential piece of internet art. The entire 90s public access CRT vibe, the one that every YouTuber uses, the one I'm using right now, all comes from $1 Million Extreme. You have people like one of my favorite animators, Wormwood, who makes stuff dealing with identity, pop culture, and the internet. All with this very clear sort of anti-academic, edgy undertone that, wouldn't fly anywhere but YouTube. It's hard to pin down this new wave of art making, as it's totally free from academic systems and chronology. What's emerging online, free from liberal institutions, isn't necessarily conservative art, but it's contextually subversive. These artists are using irony, transgression, and aesthetic innovation to challenge progressive orthodoxy. In a world that has become stagnantly progressive, this is avant-garde. So let's return to our original question. Why do liberals suck at art? Great art emerges from the intersection of beauty, subversion, and narrative, regardless of the artist's politics. It doesn't matter if you vote red or blue. It matters that if you're willing to take the social risks that art demands of you. In 1920s Berlin, that meant challenging conservative bourgeois values. But in 2025, that means challenging progressive orthodoxy. The medium changes, but the courage required remains constant. In a few decades from now, when we reflect on the art movements that defined the 2020s, it won't be black portraiture. It won't be the queer interior space. It'll be little dark age edits of Charlie Kirk rising like Christ. Thank you for watching. Never kill yourself.
I got a live show coming up on September 30th in Toronto. That's at Division 88 on Geary Avenue. Doors at 6:30 p.m. The Anti-Clanker reading. I'll be with J-Reg, Final Girl Digital, We're in Hell, One Dime, Duncan Clark, Nat Loss, myself. The link is below for the tickets. It'll be a lot of fun, and I hope to see you there.